In this lesson, I'm combining the three chapters on poverty in the three states of life: marriage, religious life, and the clerical state. I'm going to be focusing on the first chapter since I assume that most of the participants in this course are lay. I don't feel it's for me to say what the religious and clerics should be doing. Also, it's fashionable right now for the laity to freely criticize their priests and bishops, but I think this can be dangerous. So I want to avoid this turning into church bashing session in which we all talk about the failings of our pastors when it'd be much better for us to talk about our own failings. Though, as Father Dubay says, all three chapters contain points that could be relevant and interesting to anyone, and I will encourage everyone to read all three of them. Most married people, or for that matter, lay people in general, may wonder why they've never heard about having a call to voluntary poverty. But as Father Dubay says, gospel scholars largely agree that the call to poverty was meant for all Christians. And without the background of this general call that's provided in the rest of the book, the particulars of voluntary poverty in the different states of life won't be intelligible. Everything that's said in the rest of the book should be taken as applying to all in different ways. And that should be kept in mind here. As Father Dubay said near the beginning of the book, the call to gospel poverty is simple and beautiful. It's challenging, yes, but it's still simple and beautiful. And the married saints demonstrate this in their lives. What can we learn from their witness? What is particular to living out voluntary poverty in married life or among the laity? Father Dubay lays out 6 particular points. The first is having a proper value motivation. Poverty is not for itself, it is for the values of readiness, a sparing, sharing lifestyle, credibility, and pilgrim witness that he described in earlier chapters. And all these values apply to the laity just as they apply to religious and clerics. The laity, especially, should not push poverty to the point of neglecting the duties of their state in life. This does not mean that they can dispense with voluntary poverty, but that if poverty is hampering the caring for their children and performing their other duties, it is excessive. Father Dubay presents St. Thomas More as an example. He was an important and responsible statesman and a loving father, but he still lived frugally. The third point that Father Dubay makes is about what he calls secular signs. Even secular experts agree that the average American eats and drinks too much and that tobacco use is detrimental to health. In fact, many secular experts are now starting to extol the benefits of a simpler life and fewer possessions. If we're not living up to these secular standards at the very least, we're obviously not living in gospel poverty. A fourth point is that we're supposed to challenge the world. We have to be distinctive and different enough from the world to challenge the standards that the world holds. In particular, we need to provide a pilgrim witness. We need to be clearly focused on our journey to heaven instead of on the passing things of this day to day life. And such a pilgrim witness, such a challenge, requires us to avoid any kind of vanity or excess in consumption. And part of this avoidance of vanity and excess is a focusing on true beauty. We should be focused on the beauty of the soul rather than on consumerism. And this is especially, Father Dubay says, a good thing to teach children. He again brings up St. Thomas More, a letter that Thomas More wrote to his children's tutor, he was explaining that he wanted his children to understand that outward finery of dress counted for nothing ultimately. And finally, what Father Dubay calls saintly radicality. Many lay saints were just as radical in their pursuit of voluntary poverty as any religious might have been. Father Dubay presents some examples of this. Some lay saints fasted for months on end and performed many other penances, while giving almost all they possessed to the poor. At the same time, he points out that not every individual might be called to follow every particular example, that each of us are still called to discern our own path in trying to live voluntary poverty, and in fact, in trying to live a life of sanctity in general. In the final chapter of the book, Father Dubay will talk about the joy that comes from living the call to voluntary poverty.